Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are absolutely not wading in the shallows.
No, definitely not.
We are jumping straight into the deep end of history, evolutionary psychology, and what might be the most provocative take on the rise and fall of empires I think I have ever read.
Is definitely a scorched earth perspective, for sure.
Right, and before we even get into it, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this if you enjoy deep dives into unfiltered ideas that you will not hear in mainstream media, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button right now. Seriously, support the show so we can keep bringing you the stuff that usually gets filtered out.
Yeah, please do. And honestly, provocative is putting it mildly here. The text we are analyzing today is essentially a stick of dynamite thrown into the standard timeline of British colonial history.
Exactly. We are looking at an ebook titled 1842 Acquisition of Hong Kong Manly Expansion Until Handover and Decline by Conrad Riker.
And right for the preface, Riker is incredibly blunt. He basically says, if you believe modern society's obsession with gender equality is progress, you should probably just skip this book.
Yeah, he makes his target audience very clear. He is writing this specifically for those of you out there, men who feel like Western civilization is crumbling due to a lack of decisive leadership.
Right.
For the red-pilled manosphere men who want to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists. That is exactly who this is for.
And just to be clear up front, as always, we are just the messengers here. We impartially break down the source material. We aren't endorsing the political viewpoints, but we're absolutely going to report on them because the framework he builds is fascinating.
Fascinating and completely unapologetic. It is an ultra-long, incisive, and fascinating look at how testosterone, opium, and stoicism built a superpower.
And how what he calls estrogen insurgencies allegedly dismantled it. He describes the book as edutainment, but the core thesis is deadly serious. He views the entire arc of Hong Kong through the lens of biological hierarchies and masculine steel.
It's the great man theory of history, but infused with endocrinology. And if that sounds like the kind of historical deep dive you've been waiting for, I am telling you right now, head over to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy this ebook immediately. We are only going to scratch the surface today.
You really do need to read it to get the full picture. So let's start where Riker starts, with what he calls the Iron Foundations.
Yes, the 1842 acquisition of Hong Kong. Riker completely ignores the usual dry history of trade disputes and treaties. He claims this acquisition was, quote, testosterone made manifest. Unpack that for us.
Well, Riker centers this argument on Sir Henry Pottinger. He was the first governor of Hong Kong. Riker uses him as an avatar for a lost type of masculinity.
The stoic conqueror archetype.
Exactly. The book draws this really sharp contrast between Pottinger and modern diplomats. Riker argues that while today's leaders beg for trade concessions over tea, Pottinger deployed warships and unbreakable will.
He wasn't relying on sensitivity training.
No, not at all. Riker says Pottinger was a biological realist. He understood that in a vacuum of international law, force is the only currency. And this ties into a core concept in the book, the testosterone feedback loop.
Right, he compares it to Hernan Cortez burning his boats in Mexico.
Yes, the burning boats theory. Riker cites anthropological research suggesting that forcing men into a fight-or-die scenario isn't just a tactic. It forces a hormonal shift. It creates apex predators because you strip away the safety net.
Which completely rewrites how their brain assesses risk. It's wild. And he contrasts this historical stoicism directly with modern corporate culture. He talks about vulnerability theater.
Oh, the anecdote about the tech founder.
Yes. For you guys listening who work in tech or corporate environments, you'll recognize this instantly. He talks about a startup founder who wept during a pitch to show his human side.
And he lost the funding immediately. The investors pulled $1.2 million.
Because, as the internal memo from the VC firm said, capital flows toward glaciers, not geysers.
It's a brutal line. But Riker uses it to synthesize his view that superior men create superior outcomes. Modern academia labels this kind of ruthless pragmatism as toxic, but Riker points out that history simply calls it victory.
You can't enjoy the prosperity of an empire while demonizing the aggression required to build it. But speaking of aggression, we have to pivot to the darker side of this book. Section 2 covers the Opium Wars.
Right, and he does not shy away from the brutality here.
Not at all. But he doesn't just call it a drug trade, he calls it chemical and economic warfare. Specifically, endocrine warfare.
This is where his biological lens gets really specific. Riker claims that the British flooding China with opium wasn't just about money, it was about physically lowering the testosterone of Chinese officials and scholars.
By how much? He had a specific statistic in there.
He claims there was up to a 40% drop in testosterone in chronic users. The opium flooded their dopamine receptors and chemically pacified them. He calls it the narcotic lever.
Using small addictions to move large populations.
Precisely. If you chemically alter the decision makers, the nation pivots. They literally lose the hormonal drive to resist.
And the part about the scholars was incredibly insidious, targeting the intelligentsia.
Yeah, he says the British deliberately targeted Confucian scholars right before their imperial exams. They provided these study aids laced with opiates.
So they were actively trying to destabilize the smartest men in the country.
According to Riker, yes. And then you combine that biological warfare with what he calls economic castration by treaty.
The economic brutality described in this section is staggering. The trade imbalance drained 30 million ounces of silver annually from China.
Riker compares the British Empire to a vampire squid attached to China's financial face. He calls it the reverse Midas touch. Everything China touched turned to silver that just flowed right out of their borders.
It's just massive systematic domination, which leads perfectly into his next major argument in Section 3, the efficiency of masculine systems.
Riker presents some very controversial data points here regarding gender, productivity, and all-male environments.
Let's talk about the testosterone tax. I found this part fascinating.
It is. He notes that colonial officers in Hong Kong burned vastly more calories than bureaucrats back in London.
Something like 4,000 calories a day just doing administrative work in the heat, right?
Exactly. He argues that maintaining order in a hostile environment requires a massive hormonal and energetic drive. That is the testosterone tax. And he says this is why all male environments are biologically optimized for empire building.
Because they handle that tax better. He brings up Norwegian fishing fleets.
Yes, he claims that historically all male crews on those fleets had half the accident rates of mixed crews.
Half the accidents. And he mentions Japanese shipyards too.
Right, where he says all male teams installed hull plating 7 times faster. Riker's critique here is tied to what he calls the Atlas paradox.
Explain the Atlas paradox for the listener.
It's the idea that society only grows when men bear a disproportionate amount of physical risk, like how 97% of the workforce in Alaska fishing is male. Riker argues that modern society relies entirely on this masculine risk-taking, but simultaneously tries to engineer it out of existence.
Which brings up his critique of the modern man cave. He absolutely hates the concept of the man cave.
He does. He contrasts the man cave with the barracks.
Because the man cave isolates men.
Yes, yeah. Riker argues that isolation breaks men down. He prefers what he calls engineered friction. He points to Victorian naval hammocks where men slept crammed together or crowded Hong Kong police locker rooms.
Right, spaces where you are shoulder to shoulder.
Exactly. He claims that this physical proximity, this engineered friction, actually spikes oxytocin and competence among men. It builds a unified threat response that you just don't get when men are isolated in their suburban basements.
So the system worked because it forced men into this high-friction, hyper-masculine crucible. But then, obviously, the British lost Hong Kong. Which brings us to Section 4.
The feminist fifth column and the handover.
This is probably the most explosive part of the book. Riker's theory on why the British handed it back in 1997.
He calls it the estrogen insurgency.
A shift from dominance to empathy.
Exactly. He argues that the handover didn't happen because of unavoidable diplomatic pressure. It happened because Westminster replaced biological realism with ideological fantasy.
He gives that crazy historical example to back up his point about empathy being a security risk. The petticoat gunpowder pipeline.
Ah, yes. He describes how women would smuggle gunpowder in their hats because British customs officers refused to search nursing mothers. Riker uses this to argue that empathy and social graces create fatal blind spots in security.
Right. He's saying that as the leadership class became more feminized, they started prioritizing empathy over dominance, and the whole structure rotted from the inside.
And he claims there were distinct hormonal shifts in leadership leading up to the handover. He says that by 1996, British diplomats literally reeked of cortisol, the stress hormone, while the incoming PLA officers radiated dominance.
The handover hormone collapse. He actually cites biometric data for the 1997 handover itself.
He does. He claims that police cortisol levels spiked 217% during the handover.
That is a massive stress response.
It is panic. And he points out that arrest clearance rates plummeted right after. The new bureaucracy became entirely risk-averse. As Riker puts it, estrogen swings turn risk assessment into roulette.
It's basically a complete biological failure of leadership, and he extends this dominance theory to everything, even the buildings.
Section 5 covers cultural and architectural domination.
But colonial architecture wasn't just functional, it was psychological warfare.
Riker points to the old Central Police Station in Hong Kong. He says it was designed like a predator's jaw. It was built specifically to intimidate.
And the gun placements across the colony.
They were mathematically calculated to dominate both sight and sound. It was an omnipresent reminder of force.
Even religion was weaponized. He says they didn't use Christianity for Sunday school hymns.
No, they used it as a declaration of holy victory. He references Psalm 2, treating the expansion of the empire as a divine mandate to rule. Riker's final warning in the text is that civilizations thrive on this masculine vigor, and they inevitably collapse without it.
Soft men lose territories, decisive men build them.
That is the core tenet of his argument.
It is a profound, provocative, and unapologetically red-pilled take on history. Reading the 1842 acquisition of Hong Kong is an experience. It completely refuses to apologize for the past.
It really leaves the reader with a stark question. Can a civilization actually survive if it ignores biological reality and refuses to pay the testosterone tax?
That is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of this book. It is pure masculine steel, and if you guys are intrigued by this breakdown, you need to read the full text.
Highly recommend.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now and buy the ebook. You will not look at modern history or our current institutions the same way again.
And you should also follow the author for his latest essays.
Yes, make sure you follow at Conrad Riker on Substack for more updates. He is constantly posting new research on these topics.
And just to leave you with one final thought building on Riker's theories,
Yeah.
he mentions a stockbroker telling him that the bull market died with the Union Jack.
I remember that quote.
It really makes you wonder, is the chronic economic volatility we are seeing in the world today not just bad policy, but an actual symptom of a deeper hormonal collapse in global leadership?
A biological market crash. That is a hell of a thought to end on. We are going to leave you guys to mull that over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you on the next one.